Welcome to episode 16 of the Red Mile podcast. I'm Cameron Woolridge, and this is my co-host Nathan Woolridge.
Hello, everyone.
And today we would like to welcome a special guest to the Red Mile. It is my honor to introduce two-time Stanley Cup champion with 1,128 regular season games, 76 goals, 282 assists, amounting for 358 points. This was all in a 17-year NHL career, 9 of which were in Calgary. Welcome to the podcast, Jamie Macoun.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no worries. And so when you kind of hear all that stuff now, what do you kind of think about when you think about all those games and everything?
Well, you know what? It's funny because I do a lot of charity work. Right now I'm the president of the Flames Alumni, and so you have a chance to meet all kinds of different alumni. The way ours is set up, we obviously love having former Flames, but we also accept other NHL players as well. So you'll see somebody and you'll go, oh yeah, I remember that guy, and then you'll look at his stats, and sometimes it's like one way or the other. Sometimes you go like, wow, he played 1,400 games, or he only played 400 games. It's kind of confusing sometimes because if you've played it, you realize how many games, especially back in the 70s and 80s, the hockey was definitely different than it is now. And one thing that you mentioned the regular season games. But when I was, especially the first 10 years of course, we would play, 6, 7, 8 exhibition games. And usually you'd play at least half of those. And those were just out of control, because you had a lot of physical players learning and trying to get a spot. And oftentimes, they'd be fighting against different players. So you hate to use the word bloodbath, but those games were very physical. And so you throw in, 4 times, 10, whatever, how many games. So there's like another 70 exhibition games. And then you throw in the playoff games where I don't know what the number is, 165. And those are all very physical. And you think the hockey is tough, and it is tough, and it was tough. But it was the playoff games that seemed to be the toughest. And, come the end of the season, when that last game happened, well, whether it was a win or loss, you just like the body had just this like exhale of relief because you were hurt. Your fingers were broken, your shoulder was separated, your knees were whatever. You're getting blood and pus sucked out of your knees and stuff, and it was just like, okay, it's done. I'm off. I'm off for 3 months or whatever. And it was just this incredible relief. And then they'd give you a call and say, hey, would you mind going to play in Europe for Team Canada? And you'd be like, no. But I did that as well.
Yeah. And so I guess to kind of tie in, to go back to maybe when you first started playing hockey, like, could you kind of tell me a little bit about what kind of drawed you to the game to maybe join this game that you said that all these bad things like injuries and everything?
Well, being a typical Canadian boy, I'm a little bit older than you two youngsters here. I was born in 1961, grew up in a small town in Ontario, north of Toronto. And, I played baseball, I played soccer, I played hockey. I played everything. I just really enjoyed playing sports, and no cell phones, no internet, no Netflix. So you spent a lot of time outside, and so you really participated in sports. And I loved all sports, but hockey was a special passion. And as I went along and played on some really good teams. Very, very fortunate that way. Both my older and my younger brother got scholarships to the United States. And they didn't win anything, right? They were just a group of people they were growing up with. They were good people, but they didn't have enough talent. And my team, we win the All-Ontario 5 times. We win the Silver Stick, if you don't know what that is, it's twice, 2 out of 2 times. We went like 3 years without losing a game, and we only had like 12 players. And it was just this weirdest thing, and we were just growing up that way, thinking that's the way life is. You win everything and stuff. And then I had a chance to go to school in the States with a scholarship. And I was too small to play major. I was a runt, really. And I always use this example, but no one believes me. But going into grade 11, I was 4'11", 95 pounds.
Wow.
And going into grade 11, and then obviously I grew quite a bit in the back half of grade 11 and 12, and back then there used to be grade 13 as well in Ontario if you were going to go on to university. So I had a few years to catch up. But things just went along. I just enjoyed hockey. I never, ever thought I was going to play in the NHL. I was always so small. They talked about other guys on my team and other names in the area. They're going to make the NHL. They're going Major A. They're going to go. And I was just like, I'm just having fun. And it wasn't until my second year of university where I actually blew out my knee and had to have full reconstruction. The very next game, I'm sitting in the stands, and these people all came up to me going like, "Are you Jamie Macoun?" I go, "Yeah." What are you doing here? Like, what's wrong with your knee? And I told them what was going on. They all looked at each other and said, "Well, if you ever get healthy, give us a call," sort of thing. And they walk out, and I'm going like, who the heck are those guys? It's like who are they?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking they're wearing trench coats like everybody used to do back in the day. And my coach came to me and said, "Those are scouts that had come to see you, and they were thinking about, whether you can make the NHL." And that was literally the first time I thought, hey, maybe I have a chance. So there you go.
And so when you were playing minor hockey and your team was having success and stuff, what was one of like the best memories or stories that you can think of from that time?
We won the All-Ontario Championship. I don't even know what year it was, but a few years in a row, because we were such a small town, we're like 11,000 people, we had one fire hall. And because we won it, we were allowed to ride on the back of the fire engine and cruise around town. And the siren was going, and people are coming out of their houses. And, and as a 10-year-old and 11-year-old and 12-year-old, whatever we were at the time, because we were, like I said, very fortunate to win it a few times. Just being able to ride the fight, and to this day, I have people still come up to me. I remember coming out of my house and seeing you bozos, going by, and the interesting thing is, sports is an incredibly different aspect of your life, because if you have success, even if you don't have success, but when you have success, it even cements things more. And some of my very best friends to this day are people that I grew up with playing hockey and baseball, but typically it was hockey. And I'll go golfing once or twice every year or so, and the majority of the people are from those hockey teams. And even though the rest of them didn't have the success that I did in hockey, they've all been successful in their own right. And the memories just come back to you. And it's kind of like a wave of like, hey, we did that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. And so you kind of had a different path to the NHL than a lot of people, I guess, right? That you kind of talked about that not until kind of right before you made the NHL were you even really thinking about it, right?
Yeah, and I really started to work out. I'd never worked out until that time. And I was at Ohio State University, the Ohio State, I better say that properly because they get mad if you don't. And they had different programs that they did. And I had a couple of guys that were staying full-time down there that were also on hockey scholarships. And we just worked out and went to school during the summer. And the difference, goes to show you, put a little mental, aptitude towards it. The very first game that we played, I was playing a defense, of course, and some kid came in on me, and I kind of half grabbed him and threw him at the glass, and he broke through the glass, and he got hurt. And it was kind of like, whoops. And I was feeling bad about myself a little bit. And then, the coach comes up to me at the end of the game and goes, "You give me till Christmas." And I'm going like, give you till Christmas for what? Like, what happened? Like, what did I do? It's like, I don't want to go home. And basically said, all the scouts that were there, it was a big name, had come to see that kid that you just threw through the glass. So the kid's out, and now your name is prevalent. And I said, so what you're telling me is, and it was a little bit of a gray area because the NCAA is very, very cognizant of the fact they don't want anything. You give a basketball player a pair of shoes, it's considered, a bribe or something like that. So I never got anything like that. But suddenly the coach said, if you leave, you're going to the NHL. And I'm kind of like, I'm going to the NHL. It's like, a Canadian boy. Yeah. And at that time, there was very few. I don't even know what the number was, but if I said 6, that might be high. But there was 5, 6 players in the NHL that had not been drafted, that had gone the college route. And that was me. I never was drafted. At 18, I was too small. And then there used to be what was called a supplemental draft at age 20. Well, that was the year I blew my knee out. So suddenly I'm turning pro, and everybody's going like, how can this guy be a free agent? Like, either yelling at the scouts, how could we have missed this guy? And so consequently, I had an opportunity to go to a number of different, seven different NHL teams, and out of 21 at the time, had some interest in me. And the two that were the most interested were Winnipeg and Calgary. And I had a chance to go to St. Louis and watch a game. Al Coates, Al McNeil, and of course Cliff Fletcher are in the car with me, and we literally were driving around after the game. And I was on my way back to the airport the next day. And they said, well, we'd like to sign you. And, no agent, no nothing. In 5 minutes, we figured out our contract. We shook hands, and then I got on the plane and, took off. And, again, no cell phone. So I basically had to wait till I got back to my spot to phone my parents up. I said, I think I'm playing in the NHL. Are you sure? And it's like, well, I shook hands with Cliff Fletcher, and he says I'm getting, and they're sending me a plane ticket. So I'm thinking that's a yes. So it was a big moment for my family, big moment for all my friends as well, because they, kind of through the kind of the fact, hey, I was part of that. I helped him get it good, and there's some truth to that. But I can tell you one thing: the first year I come back after playing hockey, apparently every time we went to a bar, I had to buy. That's what I know.
Yeah, and I guess so. So when you kind of signed that, what a little bit more about everyone's reactions, because I know that that you do have a pretty special relationship with your dad. So what was kind of his reaction to all of that?
Well, you know what? My dad was one of those guys, like a lot of, I'm sure many, maybe it's even your own parents, where there's so many people that volunteer. And it seems it's the same volunteers, help with the baseball, help with the soccer, help with the school, help with the bake sale or whatever the heck it is. And my dad had been, a vice president and the president of the Newmarket Hockey Association, and a few years working in that, and helped coach and that. And so for him, because of his support, because of my family's support, and the support of other families as well, the opportunity was given to me, and I never forgot that. And after I turned pro, it was obviously exciting for the family. But my dad got involved in hockey even more, where he bought a junior team. And when I say bought, he had to form it basically.
Right.
He and three other gentlemen all put some money in and put a team together. And it ran for 20-something years. And he did a great job. He was like the go-to guy, and he helped run the league. And I mean, he was just one of those guys that had a pretty good head on his shoulders, didn't get too red light, green light thing. It was just like, hey, here's go. And he was more than willing to help other coaches and general managers with their teams. And, when we won the Cup in '89, my mom had passed away in '88, September of '88. Right. And so it was a tough year on him. And he had permission from his work. He used to work at the Royal Bank. He had permission from his work basically to go to all the games that we played in the playoffs. And I'm not sure the actual number that he went to, but I think he went to like 15 or 16 of them. And he was in Montreal when we won the Cup. Mm-hmm. And I walked out, grabbed him and his three buddies that he was with, and I've got pictures of them in the old Montreal Forum, in our dressing room, holding the cup and drinking out of the cup. So that was awesome. That was pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so after you signed that contract and then leading up to your first NHL game, how did that all play out? And when was that first NHL game?
Well, you know what? It's kind of funny because I worked out, and I think I'm in shape, and then I get here, and for a couple of different reasons, I didn't fathom them at the time. It's like, well, you're not ready to play. And I'm going, I'm ready to play. I'm better than those guys, whoever they were, pointing out the different guys. They said, no, you're going to go. And so I had to go work out with another gentleman, and he was a physio guy. And we did all kinds of stuff. And for about 2 weeks, I worked out. And then I would be skating at the corral, oftentimes extra by myself. And And I didn't realize at the time, because you're young and naive, it's like they're just grooming me. Like, okay, relax. You got to watch some of the games. You got to see how it plays out. This isn't college, this isn't Kansas anymore, Dorothy.
Yeah.
And so I get to watch some games, and in college you're not allowed to fight. In junior, I played junior A. There was a lot of fighting, but 3 years away from it, you don't realize the physical part of it. And so, in hindsight, it was a great move. But when I finally got the call, like, you're playing tonight, I go home, phone my parents up. Hey, I'm playing tonight. And to be honest with you, this is scary. It must be my age. I cannot remember if it was even televised, because back then, about just under half of the games in Calgary were televised. And so if you were out in Toronto or out in Montreal, you saw Montreal, Toronto, Boston, Rangers. You didn't see Calgary playing against Vancouver or whoever. And so it was just one of those things. I went out and played. I remember getting the puck and, looking for a guy to pass to, and I'm down behind my own net, and I do a nice pass. Like, I'm going, like, look at me, I'm an NHLer. And then 2 seconds later, bang, I'm on my rear end, and I realized, oh yeah, like, don't look at your pass. Don't look at your pass. And I got up and I go, like, oh, that guy's pretty big. Then I realized everybody's pretty big. I was playing at about 192, 193 when I first started playing, and there was a lot of guys there that were a lot bigger than that. So that's another thing you had to realize. It's not boy strength anymore. It was man strength out there. And it was pretty physical.
Well, and speaking of the physical part of it, is we've grown up seeing parts of the Battle of Alberta, but we never really got to experience the golden years of it. And I know Cameron's been really wanting to know a little bit more about those times with against Edmonton and that kind of thing.
Well, you know what? First off, the Battle of Alberta. It's like right now, if you had. You guys are too young, but the two best tennis players used to go off against each other. And the reason why everybody remembers it is because they were the two best tennis players in forever. And the same thing in baseball, the Yankees and Boston, there's a big rivalry. Well, the Smythe division was a great division. It had Winnipeg was a very good team. Vancouver was a very good team. And then, of course, Calgary and Edmonton were maybe slightly better than both of them. When I say slightly, they were better. But on any given day, you might not win. And so it was a very physical division. And teams would come in from the East that are on like a 7-game winning streak and lose in Winnipeg, get beat up in Calgary and Edmonton, go to Vancouver, get beat up. They might lose 4 straight and then go down to L.A., and L.A. wasn't as strong, but they might lose there too, and then they'd whimper home. But all I remember is like one of the very first events that, I want to say events, happenings, is we're playing in the Corral, we're playing against Edmonton, and there were funny seats there. You used to have to kind of, if you're on the ends, you had to sometimes step up like 2 feet to sit down. It was this weirdest thing. And I didn't have seniority, so one of the older defensemen kept making me move up. Like, you got to sit in the corner. So I was sitting in the corner quite a few times there, which was okay. And all of a sudden, it's like bench brawl, and the fight starts, and I'm still moving up to the front there, and then people are jumping over, and the benches are on the opposite sides, and the thing about the Corral was the boards were like 12 inches higher than regular boards.
Okay.
Because they use them, or maybe it's even higher than that, 16 inches higher, because they, in the summer and when it was built for holding cattle, right? So, these big, so people are jumping over and people are falling onto the ice. It's just like watching kids go on the ice. And I start fighting, and I don't even know who I'm fighting, right? I'm fresh out of college. It's like, who are these guys? Or you didn't have the internet, you didn't have YouTube and stuff. And you grab this guy, you start throwing punches, and you hope you survive. And somehow I end up fighting, Dave Semenko, and I'm going like, this guy's a lot bigger than the other guys. Eh? Like, who the heck is this guy? And it's kind of a joke. I talk about it a lot because I punch him, and then he just kind of looking at me like I'm a gnat, and he rips my helmet off like whew, and he's just giving me the shots to the head. So I'm kind of keeping my head down, trying to fight back, and all of a sudden, he stops hitting me, and I'm thinking I must have hurt him, right? But I don't want to look up yet in case he's waiting to punch me. Well, that goes on. It's got to go on for like 25 seconds. It seemed like an eternity. But now Jim Poplinski's come over, and those two are kind of jostling with each other as well. And I'm kind of half holding on. So then I go to throw some punches. Anyways, it all gets broken up, and I get thrown out of the game. But the way the box scores, you know, on the newspapers reads is like Jamie Macoun, Dave Semenko, right? 5-5, 10 in game, right? And so around the league, people are looking at this going like, who the heck's this Macoun? And he's fighting Semenko.
Yeah.
And then I had another fight in Chicago where I fought this kid named DuPont. And again, it was like a 5, and you know, like, what the? So I was never really a very good fighter, but I had a couple of good fights. And as I like to joke about, I milked those fights for like 17 years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like the biggest fight from you that I like is the one against Messier when he was playing for the Oilers. I've watched that one on YouTube like 5 times. So is there any like specific player that really stands out other than Semenko that you fought?
Well, there was a guy out of Vancouver. And again, like I said, I was very naive. And back then, it was different. So there's a bit of a scrum in the Vancouver. It was in our end, but it was in Vancouver. And so I'm on the ice, and people are pairing up, and I go to grab this one guy, and I joke that he was a European. He probably was, but I'm not sure. And then all of a sudden, he just skates away and jumps off the bench onto the bench,
Wow.
and on comes another guy. Like, you're not allowed to do that now. So they throw out their fighter. And this guy, his name is Delorme. And he is, he's a little bit smaller than me, and I'm kind of like, apparently this guy doesn't know who I am, right? Like, and I'm the guy who knocked out that other guy, and then I had to fight with Semenko. Like, I'm the real deal here.
Yeah.
And I joke about it, and he's looking at me going, son, I'm going to hurt you. And I'm going, son, I'm going to hurt you. Like, you don't, and we're dancing around for a little bit, and then the fight starts, and I mean, that was a heck of a fight, and it hurt me, I can tell you that much. And I remember fighting him, and then I kind of hit him, and he kind of buckled. And my inexperience in fighting, of course, instead of just taking advantage of it, I kind of like, oh, he's done. Well, he pops right back up, and he starts throwing more punches at me, and it's like, oh, I want this to end now. It's like, so I kind of grabbed him, and he was done. But the interesting thing about that was that the very next game we meet, he's remembering me, and I've kind of got, like, I've moved on. I don't care. Like I got the whole world ahead of me, and he's later on in his career. And he makes a beeline across to me to hit me. And at the very last second, I see him coming, and I kind of half duck, and I avoid him. And the Vancouver bench had not, they were in the middle of a change. They had not shut their door properly. And so he goes into the door, blows his knee out. His career is done.
Wow.
So in hindsight, that fight I did win because he didn't have too many more games after that.
Yeah. And so, like, at this point, I guess you were probably pretty early in your career, right? And
Yeah, this is all first year, basically.
Yeah. And then, so I guess we'll speed the timeline ahead a little bit. So, kind of near the late 80s, the Flames were an incredible team. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe what made that team stand out a little bit?
Variety, literally variety. Like in the dressing room, we had one of those teams where no one could get too big ahead. We got Lanny McDonald. He's played over 1,000 games in there. We've got guys with like less than 100 games. And the guys with less than 100 games are joking with Lanny. Like, hey, old man, stuff like that. And to his credit, one of the reasons why we were so good is he understood the mechanism of hockey, right? He understood that you got to have a chance to blow off steam. You can yell at each other. You can do whatever. And we had Jim Poplinski there. He played a lot of games by then. But we had a really good group. And Rick Natras was a fun guy. And he used to cause a lot of trouble for me. And he'd be off the ice, on the ice. But also we had Dave Hunter. And we had Rick Wamsley. And we had Doug Gilmore. Mm-hmm. And they all used to joke with each other. But Rick Natras and Rick Wamsley and Dave Hunter, not Dave Hunter, Mark Hunter, all played together in Montreal, all played together in St. Louis, and all played together in Calgary.
Right.
And then three of us, myself and those and Rick and the Rick and Rick show, we all get traded to Toronto. So these guys would get going on each other, and one was a little heavy, I won't say what, and one was supposedly a little bit uglier, and one was a little bit stinky, or whatever the heck you want. And they would get going, and the dressing room understood, like, when we needed to just relax, we've had a bad skate or a good skate, or however the coaches anticipated it or thought it was. And I'd say something to Nat. I go, Nat, Mark's been saying stuff about you. You got to say something. You just have to say something. Or you talk to Rick
Right.
Wamsley and Wammer. Huntsy's calling you fat again. You got to say something, right? And then they start jabbing each other and stuff like that. And everybody just like sat back and relaxed and had fun, and it was just released the tension. And that was the big difference. When we'd go on the road, and like today I'm having dinner with Lanny, and tomorrow I'm having dinner with Jim Poplinski. The next day I'm having dinner with one of the Swedes or somebody else. We really all got along, and that is not usually the way it is. That's not the way it was with most teams. And it makes me wonder, and I can't tell you, but it makes me wonder how the guys get along now, because we went on the road, you had a roommate, and sometimes you'd open the door and some guys come in and play cards. Now every single guy has his own room.
Right. Yep.
And they literally bring equipment, bags full of gaming devices and stuff.
Yeah, we've heard a lot about that.
It's unbelievable. I'm going, what?
Yeah.
So these guys go on the road and they spend like 6 hours by themselves? Like,
right.
That's just not right. I mean, I think I understand what the the alumni was trying to do, but I think that is a mistake. And in hindsight, if they could change that, I think they would go back to having partners, because you go on the road, it's lonely to be on the road, especially from the Western hockey side.
Right.
We used to go on the road 7, 8, 10 days and 11 days on a trip. You imagine just sitting in a hotel back then, watching Three's Company or whatever the heck was on at the time. It's like, that's a big difference. And I think one of the reasons why we were so good is we had great players. We had Joey Nieuwendyk, and we had Joey Mullen. Gary Roberts was physical. We had Jim Oplinski, who could play physical. Neil Sheehy. We had Lanny, that's kind of the old sage. And then but everybody knew their role and everybody could play. And I think sometimes that's still lacking, because you get a guy making $5 or $6 million not pulling the weight. It's tough for the coach and general manager not to play him now, because it makes them look bad too. Like, why do you have a guy making $6 million that's not playing? Back in our day, we were all making 100, 125. So if you sit the guy that's making 150, it's only 25 grand, right? It's not 4 extra million. So that's a big difference.
Yeah, exactly.
So nowadays with social media, we get to see where the cup goes and what they're doing with it. But when you won it, that wasn't a thing. So what can you tell us about the summer after winning the cup?
The first year we won it, I went on a trip with Rick Natras, my defense partner, and we went on a cruise. That was one of these ones where they bring a few hockey players and they sell tickets on these cruise lines, and just had a great time. And, there are other hockey players there, but, for that period of time, we were the boys. Like, we were the guys.
The top of the world.
Who won the cup lately? Oh, we did, right? Like, so, and some of the guys hadn't won a cup. Some had, but it had been a couple of years. So that was kind of nice. It's almost like, hey, we finally made it. There's different steps. You make it to junior, then you make it to the NHL. Or maybe you're the minors first, then you make it to the NHL. But, until you've actually won a cup, you've never really made it, right? And even there's guys I've talked to that played lots of years, that made lots of money, way more than I made. But you talk to them, hey, what's your regrets? I just wish I could have made it to the finals. I wish I could have won a cup.
Yeah.
And as great as they were, the circumstances, the team, they just never did. And so that, to me, to be able to have it twice, I won it in Detroit as well. And when I had it with Detroit, I had it for a day and a half back here in Calgary, because that's where I was coming back to. And I took it to the Children's Hospital, and I lived in Lake Sundance, and we're having a party, and I knew a guy that was a police officer, and at like 11:30 at night, the Hawks, comes over and the spotlight's on us, right? And I'm holding the cup and the beam off the cup that's all shiny.
Yeah.
And, we're putting it in the lake and we're having fun in the lake. And I go in to take a washroom break and the guys are out there. I go, where's the cup? And they're going, I thought you had it. I don't have it. Like, where's the cup? Well, they were playing with it and then decided they needed a beer. And the cup had sank into 10 feet of water into the lake. So we had to get out there and start swimming around trying to find the cup, because the handler was in the house. And I never told him until the next day. I said, oh, by the way, we lost it for about 10 minutes. So, but it was fun. And had all my friends over. And for me as a hockey player, it was obviously very exciting to be able to touch it, hold it, drink out of it, all that stuff. But it was equally as exciting for some of my friends and family.
Yeah, and I guess we're running out of a little bit of time, but we'll kind of get you to talk about maybe why you kind of came back to Calgary. You kind of because you're from Ontario, and so what kind of drew you to come back to Calgary, and then you started in real estate and all that kind of stuff too. So
Well, back in the '80s, I bought a Remax franchise with a guy, and I really enjoyed the real estate business. And but unfortunately, you don't want to be competing against the guys that are working at your office. So I
Right.
got my license, did a little bit of stuff, but then I gave it up. And after about 8 years or so down in Toronto, I made a mistake and I sold it. I shouldn't have
Right.
sold it. But, it seemed like the right thing at the time. But all I remember is my first full year that I stayed in Calgary, I had a chance to meet all kinds of people. I was with Doc Seaman at his ranch. And I'm playing horseshoes. And myself and a gentleman named Steve Bozak were playing horseshoes against some older people. They were probably in their 40s, but they seemed like they were 100 at the time. And Doc Seaman comes over and says something to me. It's like, how are you doing? Because we're in the finals now. And he goes, you guys think you're going to beat those two? And I said, oh, Doc, we're going to beat these two. Like, we're going to win this. And he goes, I don't think you are. I'm going like, no, seriously, we're going to win. He goes, well, the one guy you're playing against is the premier, and the other guy is my business partner. So I don't think you're going to win.
Right.
And we're looking at each other. Well, it's probably going to be close, but maybe we won't win. But, the interesting thing was everybody was wearing jeans. And so afterwards, I'm talking to Doc. I said, tell me who's actually at this party. Because as a hockey player, I think at the time I'm making $125,000. I'm 22 years old or something. That's a lot of money. And I mean, it's still a lot of money, but it was a lot of money back then. Not quite at the range where they're at now. But you're looking around and there was like 30 people there that were millionaires or tens of millionaires or 100 millionaires, right? They were like, and everybody was just so low key. They're wearing their jeans, they're shaking your hand. You need a beer?
Right.
A guy who's worth $500 million just went and got a beer for me, right? Or got a soft drink. And so that mentality is really what drew me back to Alberta.
Right.
And, I met some people that had, something had happened. They had lost their job or their business had collapsed or something. And where I grew up in Ontario, it was kind of like, oh, you lost your job. Like, oh, that's shameful, right? Like, whoa. It was kind of like, well, what are you doing now? Like, what are you going to do? Let's get her going. And it's like that can-do attitude.
Right.
And I really like that attitude. The people out there, whether they were transplanted, Saskatchewanians or whatever you call them, or the Alberta people, like everybody was like down to earth. What can we do to help? What can we do for charities? Those sorts of things.
Right.
And the weather was unbelievable. Those first few summers I had, it was blue skies every day, and you could go golfing in the afternoon and go out and have dinner, and you didn't have to go home and have a shower. And that's not something that you can do usually in Ontario. The humidity can get going pretty good. So
Yeah, for sure. And so now you're the president of the Alumni Association. So could you tell me a little bit about that and just some of the things that you're up to lately?
Well, you know what? I'm going to Slave Lake tomorrow with Colin Patterson. In like a month from now, there's 6 or 7 of us going up to Lloydminster for a charity event. We're playing against the Oilers alumni. Week after that, we're going to Fort Mac. Again, a similar sort of situation. But we went to Chinatown a week ago, and literally the alumni that I have, that I'm helping run, some of the greatest guys you ever want to meet. We've got guys that for 10 years put on a 3-on-3 project just to raise money for charity. Mm-hmm. Dozens and dozens of hours, if not hundreds of hours, put them on. We help with the Special Olympics. We help with the cerebral palsy, adapt-a-bike programs. The alumni helps for certain people that are down in their luck. We help buy eyeglasses and stuff. There's just it's unbelievable how many different things that the alumni does. Most people think it's just the Flames doing it, and they help us for sure. But it is the alumni. It's these guys, whether they played for the Flames or not, they've come together. They're with us. And, some of these guys we talked about, Joel Otto and Colin Patterson, are part of the alumni and help out. Dana Merz has been huge. He's helped run our golf tournament for 20 years. Mm-hmm. Jim Poplinski before that was helping run the alumni. But we've got some new guys like Mike Commodore. We've got Brian McGrath and Brendan Morrison I talked to yesterday at an event. We were with Curtis Glencross at his event up in Red Deer, mm-hmm. where they're raising money for the Ronald McDonald House up there. And they've been doing that for, I think, 8 years now. So we've got an incredible group. Unfortunately, when you're running it all, most of it kind of goes through you. So it takes up a lot more time than I thought, but it's time that I think is well spent. And every time that we send somebody out, we call that an event. And last year, I think it was about 350 times we sent guys out.
Wow.
Sometimes it's more than one at an event, but that's how many times we sent guys out to do charity events last year. And our alumni helped raise well over $1 million, and then on top of that, you throw in the money that the Flames Charitable Foundation donates, which I think is on average about $3 million a year, and then the private money that the different guys, whether they're alumni or with the hockey team or ownership, like some people wonder why we should have the Calgary Flames here. To take a wild guess, it's worth $5, $6, $7 million a year to charities. And then throw on top the taxes that the new players have to pay, which is a lot of money. So
Yeah,
it's a lot of money that gives back, and I'm just proud to be part of the alumni. I'm proud to be part of the Calgary Flames. I mean, I'm part of the Toronto Maple Leaf alumni as well. But when everybody asks me, which sweater do you wear, I wear the Flames sweater, and it all goes back to the Harley Hotchkiss and Doc and BJ Seaman in the Scurfields and that first ownership group. They were down-to-earth people, great people, and they literally would invite us over to their homes all the time. And just one last example: Becky Hotchkiss, still alive, great lady. I got a puck in the eye. I was at the Holy Cross Hospital, and I'm wrapped up for like 7 days. Don't move. Don't get out of bed. I'm 23 years old, and a little bit scared because they're not sure what's going to happen with my eye. And she comes up with cookies that she's baked, freshly baked, and sits with me to talk for a couple hours, hold my hand, and just talk about life. I tell that story to other alumni from other teams. Never would have happened with anyone else. I mean, and so that's another reason why I'm back here in Calgary, because we were treated so fairly, so wonderfully by not only the owners but the management here that unfortunately back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, think about Gordie Howe, these guys weren't treated near as nice as we were. And maybe that's why we have so many people coming to Calgary.
Mm-hmm. And just the last thing is, what are your thoughts on the current roster and what type of players stick out on that team to you?
Well, I mean, if I said, the four best players, you'd know exactly who I'm talking about, or the five best players. You've got a Norris Trophy winner there that's is defying his age right now. You have Johnny and Monty and Elias Lidstrom. That's a heck of a line. I mean, it's an incredible line. Maybe the biggest weakness, we've got Tkachuk as well, and we've got other great guys. I'm sorry to see a couple of guys leave. As much as some people are maybe a little bit concerned about bringing in Milan Lucic, I think that's maybe the piece that we've been missing. Right. We don't, because how many times we watch Johnny or Monty go back to the bench with shaking their hands because they've been hacked. There's been no accountability in my mind, and I'm not saying that I would be a very good enforcer, but in our day, every team I played for, you had some tough guys that were. Right. More on the, not the goon, because all the guys I played with could play as well, but I call them your fourth line players, but they also could play, and they knew what they needed to be done. But the rest of the teams also, it was team toughness. Somebody whacked one of our best players. We went out there as a team, and we abused that guy for the rest of the game, and the next game, and the next game, and the next game, so that you realize that if you were going to try to take liberties against somebody with the Calgary Flames, you had to pay the price. And I think that's maybe what's been lacking with and I shouldn't say just Calgary. Most teams are like that. If you look around the league now, there's not many teams where you say, oh, geez, you got to watch out for that guy on that team because he'll hold you accountable. That's one area that's different. But guys are making $4 million, $5 million, $6 million. I don't think you want too many of your $6 million men fighting, right? Oh, he broke his hand, he can't play for a month. Oh, thank God we're paying him $6 million a year, or $8 or $10 million a year. So it is, to give credit where credit's due, it's a totally different game than when I played. And Brad Treliving and the coaches, it's different. It's got to be very difficult handling a 23-year-old that's making $6 million, just signed a 6-year deal, right? Are you kidding me? Like
Yeah,
that's
for
American
sure.
money too, by the way, right?
Yeah.
So,
It's
so they're going to make
insane.
$50 million if they don't play another contract. They got $50 million coming at them. So, you
Yeah.
know, when I was playing, I was going to say growing up, which I'm still doing, but when I was playing, all we wanted to do was somehow buy a house. And if you could somehow pay that house off before you retired, you were so much further ahead than everyone else. Mm-hmm. It's a different game now. It's a great game to watch. I miss a little bit of the hitting, a little bit more of the accountability, but they're very talented players, very skilled, and very tough. It's a tough game out there now, even though it's not the same toughness that we had.
Right.
It's still a tough game, and you got to give credit where credit's due.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time to come in.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
It was fun, and. Like, how old are you guys? You look like you don't have any hair on your chin.
I'm 21.
Yeah, and I'll be turning 19 in September.
19. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
I didn't have too many hairs on at that time either. So, anyways, thank you for having me.